Understanding the customer journey is the first thing a CRO has to do. It's about delivering value to your customers, and it's about doing it in a way that creates value for your company. My career accelerated when I helped other people. So I identify cross-functional streams of work that have dependencies cross-functionally that we need to get done, and we build what we call stream teams. And these stream teams basically take these initiatives and they go off and they build it end-to-end orchestration of that initiative. You have to put yourself in positions where you're frightened. Individuals do good things, but great teams do great things.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
A quick pause from the episode because AI SDR agents are rewriting the pipeline playbook. The AI SDR Summit, put on by Qualified, just took place. If you missed it or want to go back through any parts, the summit is now available on demand. It explored how leaders from companies like G2, Gartner, 6sense, Salesforce, and so many more are scaling their pipeline generation with autonomous AI agents. You'll learn everything you need to know from AI SDR use cases for inbound, use cases for outbound, the landscape putting a price on digital labor, and exactly how you can use AI SDR agents to transform your pipeline generation. No fluff, just real strategies, candid conversations, and proven results. Learn all about AI SDRs at qualified.com/GTM now, which will also be in the show notes. That's qualified, QUALIFIED.com/GTMNOW. Now, back to the episode. Hello and welcome back to the GTM podcast. This is your host, Sophie Bortosisi, VP of Marketing at VC firm GTM Fund and our media brand here, GTM Now. I am really excited to be joined by Marcy Campbell. She is a multi-time CRO. She's built PayPal for over 4 years. And anyways, I won't spoil her bio. We'll get into it. But Marcy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sophie. I'm delighted to be here.
Super excited to have you. And I'll get into that bit of a spoiler here now. A quick bio for the listeners, but Marcy Campbell is AppFolio's Chief Revenue Officer, leading the sales and client services organizations. She's focused on connecting the entire customer journey by accelerating customer acquisition, delivering exceptional customer value, and maximizing adoption of products and services. She has over 30 years of experience leading high-performance sales and services teams and growing businesses across multiple industries, including fintech, data analytics, cloud computing, SaaS, PaaS, and communications. Prior to joining AppFolio in 2024, she was the Chief Revenue Officer of Boomi, where she was responsible for all revenue and revenue operations for the company worldwide. Previously, Marcy held several senior leadership roles at PayPal, where she managed an 800-plus person global organization, global team, and led 2 of PayPal's preeminent business units. She's got a BA degree in history and communications from the University of Hartford. Now, you can see why I said a little bit of a spoiler. It's a mouthful. And I know you spent some time at Boomi, actually, which had an office here where I'm located in Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah, I love Vancouver. It's great. We actually opened up our commercial sales offices there and our BDR offices there. They're in Barcelona. So 2 great places to be.
What an incredible spread across Vancouver and Barcelona. Someone selected those well.
Yeah, it was great. It was a really good pool of talent in Vancouver, a lot of great universities, and it was an opportunity for us to really extend our sales focus in the commercial areas.
Very cool. Very cool. And now, since your time at Boomi and kind of building out those teams in Vancouver, you're now building at AppFolio, and you have a really interesting intersection as a Chief Revenue Officer. Because if I'm not mistaken, you actually oversee a lot of customer-facing operations, including support, CS, customer success, operations. So I'd love to hear a little bit more around just overall your breadth and scope of responsibility as Chief Revenue Officer to begin with.
Yeah, it's interesting because it is a little bit of a different scope for a Chief Revenue Officer. I am responsible for all customer operations. So everything from the time a customer or prospect moves from marketing and our marketing acquisition engine, whether that's through digital or events, or whether that comes in through our industry experts. And my organization has responsibilities for BDR sales, for our onboarding, for our customer success, as well as support. And I also have the industry principals here because we're a vertical market and we sell into the real estate industry. We have folks that are experts and who can speak at the industry conferences and develop relationships with the preeminent industry associations. So pretty much everything that's customer facing. It's great. And for me, it's interesting because I've done all pieces of that job. So at PayPal, I ran professional services and support for 95 million merchants. I've done sales, I've done the BDR, business development, and customer success in smaller companies. And I felt really prepared to take on all of these different functions. I also have an extremely talented team underneath me. There's about 600 people on the team.
Wow, very cool. Very cool. And have you ever had this kind of customer-oriented role before as a chief revenue officer?
Yes, I always think the chief revenue officer or anybody who's in sales is very customer focused. I had the breadth of sales and services at PayPal. So I was responsible for not only selling the products, but actually delivering services to those products and the implementation of those products, right? The integration of that. And so I've always been customer centric. I've always put the customer at the heart of everything I do. I love being with our customers. And we have very unique customers at AppFolio who are, if you think about it, they're either owner operators or fee managers, property managers who care about their residents. And a vast amount of them are entrepreneurs, right? They started these property management businesses themselves. They built them from the ground up, and their day-to-day responsibilities are not necessarily thinking about like technology enhancements. It's a very interesting industry and humbling industry, actually.
I'm sure there's tons of depth in vertical too. It's a space we've definitely been looking at and investing in a ton.
Yeah, it's funny because you think about it, everyone thinks they know real estate because we buy houses and we live in houses and we rent houses. And some of us like have rental units that we actually manage. And when I talk from one customer to the next, they don't have the same businesses. Like everybody it's very nuanced. The way that they structure their organizations, the way they go to market, their relationships with either their ecosystems, either they own it or they have close relationships or they've segmented it or they have different regulations based on where they are in the country. And the assumptions that you make when you at any part of the customer journey has to be based on their unique needs. And that's really hard to do at scale.
Absolutely. What about the overall landscape? You yourself personally have been extremely customer focused across all your varying roles, but as the chief revenue officer role goes overall, sometimes we see it in a more kind of sales only CRO capacity.
Yep.
Now we're seeing it across the entire go-to-market organization. What are you seeing from the overall evolution of the chief revenue officer role?
I think as we've become much more metrics focused and we've been able to build on platforms that allow for us to get more data around our customers, we have been able to expand our ability to touch and reach those customers, not just on the front end, but also across the organization. And I think for me, understanding the customer journey is the first thing a CRO has to do. They have to understand like how they found us, how they interacted with marketing, how they interacted with the company and the website, where those touch points are when they first talked to a human in your company, and then how do they gather the information that they need to make a decision? How do they then interact once they become a customer? Then how do they experience your products? How do they experience your company? And how can you provide the best value possible so that you keep that customer and they grow with you and they become a referral? So it becomes a big circular, basically a self-propelling thing where one customer will tell another customer about their experience. And so I think taking that customer journey lens is really important for anybody who's going into a CRO role, regardless of what their responsibilities are. So if they don't own marketing or they don't own customer success, they still need to actually have empathy for those other parts of the organization, because it's important for them to think holistically about the customer.
Absolutely. Do you think that we're seeing a consolidation of functions under the CRO right now?
I think it's uniquely, I know that ops is becoming consolidated. So consolidating like sales ops and services ops and marketing ops, that area is somewhere where you can get some efficiencies and you can get scale. I think with all the new technologies that are coming out that service customer touch points, it's important for you to build out a centralized view. I don't know that ops has to live in the same organization, but like give you an example, our marketing ops and our sales, our revenue ops actually works really closely together. And we've built what we call a unified customer experience platform, which I actually have later today, where we're going to go through whatever cross-functional work streams that involve the customer that we're working on together. And we use those as ways to steer the company and align our operations resources in a way that's seamless to the customer, so they don't feel like they're getting moved from one organization to the next, right? You don't want to show your organization to the customer.
Oh, that's such a powerful sentence.
You talk about I'm selling the customer and they're moving to needs analysis, and then you're going out and you're qualifying. And I think if you flip that and you say, what is a customer doing? Customer is like evaluating and they're comparing and they're identifying, right? And so you start using the language of the customer of how they go and experience what you do. I think it makes a big difference in how you show up. And your sales and services experience can be a differentiator for your company. And I think that's why it's so important to have that lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like every single touch point is a brand touch point. And so the perception of your company from a CS, from a sales perspective, it's just the culmination of every touch point. I'd love to double click on the unified customer experience platform. Super curious about this. Can we break it down a little bit tactically? You mentioned that you're meeting for it later today. What does that look like from a sequencing perspective? How often is this occurring and who's in these meetings?
Yeah, so the CMO, myself, and sometimes our CIO will join us, and sometimes we'll bring in, depending on in our services organization. So I have an SVP of sales, an SVP of service, our CMO, and then the ops folks come in. And what we do is we identify cross-functional streams of work that have dependencies cross-functionally that we need to get done. And we build what we call stream teams. And these stream teams basically take these initiatives and they go off and they build it end-to-end orchestration of that initiative. And then they come meet with us on a monthly basis and tell us, like, here's where we are, here's where the blockers are, here's like some of the changes in prioritization, here's some things we found that we didn't know that are going to change our outlook on how we interact. But it's very collaborative. And we started doing this in December. Our CMO, Lisa, and I started working together on it with our SVP of services and our SVP of sales. And it forces that coordination and collaboration. And it's a little bit of going slow to go fast, right? And so it's about delivering like an end-to-end campaign. So give you an example. We launched an end-to-end campaign that for the sales organization, we started with marketing. We built out like what the ICP was. We built out what the target messaging was and the target market, the deliverables, the product and packaging. So we worked with our product and packaging teams. And then we went to enablement. We enabled it based on materials for marketing in joint collaboration. And then we launched it across one segment of our sales organizations for testing. And when that worked, we went into the multiple segments, but we didn't stop there. What we did was we then started building the metrics of onboarding and starting to track these particular targeted prospects and then customers as to how many of them onboarded, and then what was their what size were they, and how did we interact with them from a CS perspective. And then what was their support needs? And so we're tracking them end to end. So retention, churn, like on that campaign itself. And that was that was the first thing we launched in the UCE. And it allows for us to come back. So when we get together, we're like, okay, let's look at the market campaign metrics, right? Let's look at everything from, not only the front end of, okay, how quickly did we convert them? What are our close rates? What are our win rates? But also things that, around what are our onboarding times and what was the allocation of resources for the onboarding and how many of them needed a high touch CS team and what does that look like? And then what is our cancellation rates? What is our LTV, our churn, our expansion, and our renewals? We'll go into that over time.
Is this an initiative that you came in with? Was it pre-existing in the organization? How did this initiative come to be?
It was actually my counterpart, our CMO, who came and said, think of it as like a revenue council. And so basically she's, hey, I've been trying to get this off the ground. We've not been able to do it. I'm like, yeah, this is great. Let's do it. I truly believe, as part of my due diligence of coming into this, is like your marketing partner is really important as a CRO, regardless of whether or not it sits in the CRO role or it sits outside the CRO role. The person who does marketing is got to be really strong, and they've got to be focused on partnership. And I'm lucky enough to have that here. I think the one thing that a lot of people come in and they believe that sales is a singular skill and they can do sales. They run into the sales and marketing friction, right? Like the finger pointing, the friction, you're not delivering enough pipeline, the pipeline's terrible, your salespeople can't close, like that kind of pointing fingers. I've never really had that because I've always believed that the value that the marketing folks bring is an amplifier for the business. And you have to build a platform where you can have hard conversations, but you can have honest ones and ones that accelerate the business. And that's why when Lisa said, hey, let's do this unified customer experience platform, I was like, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. And let's extend it out through services. Let's not just start between marketing and sales. And what's interesting now is now we have product in, right? So we have a new partnership with Second Nature, and like we're using the UC as a way to actually drive through how do we go to market there. And so we codify that, and then we'll be able to measure and metric like the success of that at any point in time.
That's fantastic. And when you pull together these stream teams on these specific initiatives that you and the CMO and now the service side identify, what does that look like? Do you have dedicated stream teams already built out? Or are you pulling people in almost as tiger teams whenever the need occurs based on what that?
They're tiger teams. They have day jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured.
Yeah, but it's a way to accelerate. I tell the board, it's like we're laying the train tracks, right, for us to go faster. And every little corner of that train track has a metric that we're gonna trace. And once you get those in place, then you can just drive initiatives through, right? And you build the muscle memory organizationally about like playing your position and knowing where you can actually add value. And so when you bring in these tiger teams to actually manage the process, they may use resources that sit in other parts of the organization.
Obviously, you both have the buy-in, you and Lisa, your CMO. Have there been any points of friction that you've had to really educate people around laying these train track foundations, or has it been a fairly frictionless process in terms of standing up this new initiative that spans across the entire revenue organization?
So I think it's always an education. We were a little bit flying the plane while we were learning to fly, and so you've got to keep the business running. I was bringing in a lot of new technology as well, right? We were bringing in conversational intelligence and predictive forecasting and like a new methodology. And so there was a lot of change going on the sales side of the house, less so services, although services is going through some really interesting orchestration, I would call it now. They've been through their transformation. But I think that there was Lisa and I, Vince Coley, who's the SVP of services, and McClure Foote, who's the SVP of sales, really had to build advocacy for the program with the ELT, with others. And we're still doing that. Like people still tend to work the way they used to work. And so you got to slow down and say, hey, I think that initiative, because it's cross-functional and there's multiple decision points, belongs in the UCE. Come join us. Right. And let's have that conversation and then talk about like where we can add value. But it gives them advocacy for the programs that they want to use.
Definitely. Yeah. And it sounds like a continuous educational shift, especially using and leveraging cross-functional resources.
You have to tell people things 10 times, for them to get it.
That's a good number to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And what about results? You've launched some campaigns. Can you speak to any of the either progress or results that you've seen from standing up the
Yeah.
CUC, so Unified Customer Experience Platform?
This one campaign that we did, I can't really talk to, as a public company about the results of it, but I can tell you that we hit all of our markers across every segment and every sales in every sales segment. And, our board was really complimentary of the work that we've done. And it really is about the coordinated effort. Like we're tying these things together, tying marketing and sales, tying sales and services, and it allows us to go faster. I am really excited about some of the other initiatives that we're putting through this process and expect that we'll see an acceleration. We saw acceleration in not only the actual size of the deals, we saw acceleration in the velocity of the deals, and we saw acceleration in the number of deals. And so on all those vectors, and we didn't see any drop-offs and cancellations. So super happy with how we were able to measure so far. And I know every initiative that we have is not going to be a massive success, but we'll learn as we go.
But if already you're hitting those kind of results, 4 or 5 months into it, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was fun.
How do you think?
It's always fun to win.
It sure is. How do you think this concept, maybe it's UC, maybe it comes in a slightly different form, but really that cross-functional alignment at that executive level and then how it disseminates to the entire organization, how can that be leveraged for smaller organizations?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in a smaller organization, I've done startups where you're wearing a lot of hats. And one of the values of doing startups is you get to do a lot of fun things that you have never done before. And so you get to learn. You're on this hyper learning curve. And I think that when I give you an example, I was at a startup years ago where I ran marketing for a year, and I have a lot of empathy for the marketing team because it is a complex, there's just multiple pieces of it. You got everything from analysts to PR to product marketing to messaging to branding. There's just a lot there that is very different than sales. And so I think as you're in a smaller company, you may be asked to do things that are outside of your actual expertise. I think it's really good to build a network of people who've done it before and really listen to how they've done it. I think it's also important to value and honor the people that have those skill sets, right? That you can get very self-involved when you're just trying to crush your numbers or you're really trying to build a sales organization or do a repeatable process and figure out who is your customer. But you can go a lot faster if you have good partners, you have good marketing partners. And I have always been able to maintain not only close professional relationships, but friendships with my marketing counterparts because I have a lot of respect for what they deliver.
Yeah, so it sounds like the relationship piece is definitely key.
Yeah, it's something that I think you have to, if you're coming into a smaller company or a mid-sized company or even a large company, it's really, who are you going to work with? Like, how do they think about sales? Do they see you? Do they see sales? Do they see the CRO position? Do they see the services as valuable components to the company? And where does it sit in strategy? Where does it sit in execution? And how do they partner? I think those are filters that you have to use when you join a company.
Definitely. And probably the same goes for founders too, hiring their first kind of executives and promoting. Now, you mentioned you're laying the train tracks to be able to move faster. And that was part of that educational narrative that you're sharing. Obviously, in the startup world, everybody's sprinting. You're trying to get that train to go as quickly as possible. What are, in your mind, if there's any kind of tips and tricks, almost kind of foundational ways of sprinting out the gate, or any kind of tips around just creating this kind of alignment initially for, think of it as maybe it's a Series A company, or maybe it's even a seed company.
Yeah, the seeds and Series A's are a little different nowadays because people are getting larger A's. But in the smaller companies that I've been in, it really is around identifying what a repeatable process is, right? It's about, you are almost a product manager, right? You're going out with a technology and a target that you think is correct, and you go out and you identify a need that a customer has, And you have to bring that need and those specifications back into the company because that funnel is really quick. You have to be able to have a relationship with the engineers, have a relationship with the product folks, and be able to identify something that is repeatable, that seems like a market, like having a market nose, right? And then being able to say, okay, these are the top things that I'm hearing. When I did one of the startups I did, I went in and there was one sales guy and one BDR, and they had a pipeline. And I'm a big believer in like pipeline economics. I like their pipeline was like round in the middle. Like it shouldn't be round.
Yeah.
It needs to be
Wrong shape.
It needs to be wrong shape. So I'm like, why aren't they closing anything? And so I started to call up their closed lost customers. And I said, look, I'm not going to sell you anything. You evaluated what we did. Why didn't you buy? And so rolling up your sleeves and really getting close to the customer and finding out why. And I had this one engineer who came back and he's like, we didn't buy because of A, B, C, and D. And it was like, I'm not on the cloud. I don't have any big data. I don't use an object store, right? And so he gave me the parameters of how to build out the target and the ICP, because it all starts with the ICP. And if you have a really smart marketing partner, they can help you develop who it is you're selling to and what they care about. And then once you find that, you have to identify how much value is associated with what they care about and whether or not that's something that you can build to and expand on, right? Then you walk into what does the environment look like? What are the price points that you can get away with? Like how much is this going to cost? And then can I repeat the sell enough where I can start to build out the structure of the organization in a way that distribution makes sense? Like, you might have to go through channels. You might have to do OEM. You might have to do white label. You might have to do direct. You might have to do inside. You might have to do enterprise. You just don't know until in a seed and sometimes in the old A days, you really didn't know like where to put the money and how to lay the tracks out because you're really just in discovery.
It sounds like the same common thread, though, of prioritizing the customer journey. And then as you progress, and now you're at a point where in order to prioritize, you're layering on this infrastructure like the UC. Whereas at that earlier stage, how founders and early stage operators can think about operationalizing some of these tactics is really flipping the pipeline, like you said, to the customer experience and understanding what is that customer journey and then how do I optimize against it.
Very well said. Yes.
Now, Marcy, you have had an incredible career. I'd love to transition into a little bit more behind the scenes of that career.
Yeah, sure. I actually am an advocate of women in not only sales, but also in just any professions. I've been in the industry for a really long time, and I grew up as a salesperson. I've managed to do a number of things horizontally, which added a lot of value to my career because I actually wasn't able to move up vertically. And so, for example, I would go into business development. I was in sales, and instead of going in and I would like sales management, but before I had my first VP title, I ended up having kids and I was like, okay, I then went into business development. I've done channel, I ran BDRs, I ran product marketing, I ran marketing. Like I just had the opportunity to do these horizontal jobs because at the time, I didn't look like what people thought of as a sales executive. And I think now it sits on me to help keep the door open for women who want to be in this profession and to allow them a seat at the table. I had a number of people do that to me, mostly men, and they were great advocates for me. But I have to tell you that I learned a long time ago that my career accelerated when I helped other people. And so it was really about who could I bring in the room that would be an amplifier for the things that we needed to get done, and how could I help their careers by giving them exposure to either leadership or to projects or to industries. And I take that to heart because I've hired a lot of people into BDR roles through my friends, kids who need jobs. But yeah, but I also have advocated for several women, one who I adore, who's worked for me 3 times, right, who's now at another company as a first line manager and has made a ton of money And I've known her since she was 17, right? So the
Wow.
opportunity to build out her career and give her a footing. And that story, I have, I don't know, 15, 20 of those stories with some of the women that I work with. But I also, like, if there's a time to advocate for anybody that gives them an opportunity to stretch, I'm happy to do that as well. I think that the lucky don't know they're lucky. And I was lucky in that I had some people that believed in me and gave me an opportunity to do things and were willing to give me the feedback, which is the thing you need. You need somebody to tell you the truth about like the things that are holding you back. And so when I had this one manager, I just adored, Juan Benitez, who ran Braintree when I got there. And he used to tell me, Mars, feedback's a gift. And then he would tell me the things that were hard to hear, and I could calibrate on those. And then that allowed me to actually expand my influence and expand my ability to create more money for myself and more value for my family. So I really honor that.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's so important to have those advocates throughout your career.
I've been lucky enough to be coached, right? So formally coached. I work with Jody Michaels, who's phenomenal. I've worked with other folks, and I also had an advocate, especially at PayPal. I had an advocate who, he's still there, he's great, who, when I wasn't in the room, he was a peer of mine. He would always be a proponent for the things I was trying to get done. And to me, that gave me room at the table. And so trying to do that for both men and women, but especially for women, have to look for those advocates, because there's not a lot of us in sales. We tend to go into sales. Sometimes we don't stay there. And trying to figure out the path to allow for us to have more women in senior positions, I think it's important.
Definitely. And what advice would you give to younger female professionals as they look to up-level and they look to build out their network or board of network, for example, females or males, and how to actually operationalize that?
I think you have to put yourself in positions where you're frightened. You're going to get up and talk in front of 1,000 people. No one's not frightened of that. But like, you have to stretch yourself, and you have to agree to do things that are not in your comfort zone. And sometimes you're going to fail, and it's like, you just got to keep going. And sometimes you're not going to fail. You're going to exceed your expectations, and you have to honor that as well. But I think that's what I would tell them. I tend to try to do that in my career. I'm doing things that I don't know how to do. And I find people who do, and I go and I learn, right? It's about lifelong learning. And so to me, I think if you look at, we have a saying at AppFolio, it's better, never best, right? You have that idea of, I'm going to get better every day, and I'm never going to be the best. And that is a lifelong learning philosophy that I really believe in. And I think that's what I would tell someone who's getting started, is like, just go ask for things and put yourself in the room and have a voice and interrupt if you have to. Who was it? Madeleine Albright. I was lucky enough to see her at one of the PayPal events, and someone asked her, like, how did you deal with all of these really incredibly powerful men? And she said, I learned to interrupt. I love that, right? Because sometimes you get talked over. And so I tell them, get your voice and believe in yourself.
I love it. That is great advice. Stretch, get your voice, believe in yourself. And I've often heard you speak about the importance of inclusive leadership specifically. So there's the quote, you aren't leading if no one is following you. And it's really up to leaders to create an inclusive environment. We talked about you personally. What advice would you give to other leaders to actually create that inclusive environment?
I think you have to give room for differing opinions. You have some people that, as my sister says, suck up all the oxygen in the room. So you really need to have, if you're a leader and you have your team or you have people around you, you have to be able to allow for transparent communications, which is really hard, especially if you're a nice person and you don't want to hurt anybody, or you're trying to take two opposing views and make decisions around them. So I would say, to me, it's really around calibrating that communications, that transparency, and creating a I think the most powerful thing a leader could do is create a team and create the idea of a team, of putting the team first and having this idea that you like teams can do wonderful things together. Like individuals do good things, but great teams do great things. And so being able to put the team first and creating that communication. With my coming in as a CRO, where you had a really talented SVP of sales, a really talented SVP of services, who were doing a good job, and I came in, and I'm sure people were like, why is she here? And so what I did was I just started communicating every week on an email to my team and to the 600 people and told them what I did for the week so that they knew who I was. And being able to, like I said to them, look, I'm not going to be able to meet 600 people and get to know all of you, even in a year. So what I'd like you to do is to tell me about yourself, send me a picture of who you are, what you're good at, what you like, what your karaoke song is, and what you do for AppFolio. And then what I do in those weekly emails is I send that out to everybody else. Right. And
that way
so
everyone
I say,
can actually
hey,
get to know each other better.
bingo. And the thing is that we used that when we did our kickoff. So I had everybody. So it's all about them. It's all about them feeling like they're connected to the team. Right. And then you have to be a mirror to the things that you say you're going to do. My relationship with marketing is really important to me. And I constantly tell people that. Right. And so people they'll recognize that and they'll emulate it. Right. And so it's about having people know that you have their best interest at heart, but the business's best interest, and that you recognize what they deliver as human beings.
Yeah. It's almost like a be what you see also.
Say do.
To have it emulated. Yes.
Say do. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Marcy, this has been just super, super insightful, tactical, strategic. Now, to end us off, let's transition to 2 questions, always the same. First question is, what is one tactic or strategy that is working for you today?
I have learned to personally take a beat. So to stop before I think. My diminishing feature is that I am action-oriented. And so I've learned to stop, take a beat, take a breath, listen, and then move forward. So to me, that tactic works because it gives people it gives me space to learn more, but it gives people space to actually connect with you and communicate the things that they need to. So I think that's the tactic I use pretty much every day at this point.
Take a beat. I love it. And last question, a bit of the inverse. What is one widely held belief that revenue leaders hold that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
That's a great question. I think it's widely held that like sales is focused on the numbers and it's all about the numbers. And as long as you deliver those numbers, it doesn't matter like how you deliver those numbers. I think that's BS. I think it really does matter how, because that's how you connect with your customers. It's how you connect with your peers. And so to me, it's just not about making your numbers quarter over quarter. It's about delivering value to your customers. And it's about doing it in a way that creates value for your company.
Always customer first. Fantastic advice. Thank you, Marcy. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Really appreciate the time. Thank you for joining the GTM podcast. To all our listeners, thank you for hanging out with us. We will see you next week.